Hello and welcome to poll worker training for municipal elections in Alabama. I'm Greg Woodger with Election Systems and Software. First, want to discuss opening the polls. You must arrive no later than 6:30. Polling hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Once you arrive, open your box up of your record of election supplies. Open the contents of your packet, get all the posters and display those posters on the wall. You have a directional sign if you're in a large facility that they need to be directed down a hallway. Place those appropriately. You have also a notice to voters if they are disabled or over the age of 70. If they ask for to be moved to the front of the line, they may do so. There is a voter assistance poster. Anyone may assist a voter except the voter's employer, agent of that employer, or a union agent. There are signs to how to properly mark a ballot, instruction posters. That is to be displayed also on a secrecy folder. There are instructions on it as well. You will be required to have a photo ID to vote in Alabama, and a poster is provided with all of the appropriate IDs that are permissible. There's also a no cell phone poster. You're not allowed to take photographs in the polling site, except for now there is a provision where a voter may take a selfie of themselves and their ballot inside the polling site, but no, they cannot capture any other voter's ballot in that photo. No campaign within 30 feet of the polling site. That's 30 feet from the entrance door. Any voter may come into that building. Beyond that 30 feet, they can pass out campaign cards, sample ballots, but not within the 30-foot distance from the door. Provisional balloting, we'll talk about that a little later, but there's a poster that explains provisional balloting to the voter if that's necessary. Your rights as a voter, there's a poster to just explain that as well. Voting instructions, poster is to be displayed. And a notice to voters that there are complaint and evaluation forms available if they would like to complete one of those. A large Vote Here sign to be displayed on the exterior door is also supplied. Prohibits acts of fraud and misrepresentation poster is included, and an American flag. Also, a no smoking sign is supplied in your packet. In the event that all your poll workers do not show up for duty that day, please contact your municipal clerk for instructions on how to fill those vacancies at your polling site. When you arrive that morning, you've opened your record of elections box. Please locate the voters and clerks poll list. On the back of that book is the oath of office for the poll workers and poll watchers. Swear your workers in, they sign the appropriate line. Next, there are poll watchers' oath on the back of that book. To be a watcher in a municipal election, they must have a letter signed by the candidate. One watcher per candidate is permitted. Give the oath to those watchers and have them sign in. Also, I want to mention that poll workers and poll watchers are prohibited from wearing any kind of campaign paraphernalia in the polling site that day that could influence a voter. Also, look at your size of your room and the shape of your room and set your room up in an orderly fashion where the logistics work and you have the easy flow of traffic for voters coming in and voters departing your location. When you arrive at the precinct that morning, you may have a list of voters that have applied for an absentee ballot. Follow the instructions provided by your municipal clerk and make sure you strike those voters prior to opening the polls for voting that day. That morning, before you open the polls, make sure you fill out the ballot accounting certificate. It's a large yellow sheet that's inside your supply box. Some of you may vote at large. That means you only have one ballot style for every voter that comes in your location. But some of you may vote by district. Means you have multiple ballot styles. Look carefully at your boxes. It will tell you on the label of the box what ballot style it is, the number, stub numbers contained in that box, and how many ballots are contained in that box as well. All that information, you transfer that on to the ballot accounting certificate and then extend those totals to the right-hand side and give us a grand total of ballots you received that day, because you'll reaccount for those ballots at the end of the evening. That morning when you arrive, please start up your tabulation device and your ADA device. Some of you will have DS200 tabulators and some will have M100s. We'll have instructional video in this presentation. Follow those instructions. Generate a zero tape, and at the bottom of that tape, and what you verified, there are lines provided for the inspectors, clerks, and watchers to sign that zero tape. Roll that up and secure it. Do not tear that tape off. It will remain intact for the entire voting day. The ADA device, some of you will have auto marks and some will have express votes. There'll be instructions as well on that device. Start that unit up, get it powered up, and be ready for voters when you open the polls at 7 a.m. In Alabama, every voter is required to have a photo ID to vote. If they do not have a photo ID, and there's a list provided of the IDs that are acceptable, there is one exception to that rule. If a voter fails to have photo ID and two polling officials can positively ID that person, there is an election official's affidavit for identifying qualified elector. Once two poll workers sign that, print their name and date it, and they print the name of the voter they're identifying, place that document in the record elections box in envelope 6, and let the voter vote without a ID. If they cannot comply with the voter identification rule and two poll workers do not positively ID them, then they will be directed to the provisional ballot process, which we'll cover later in this presentation. When a voter comes in, if they have an I, some counties might have an INA beside their name, means that voter's on inactive status. Doesn't mean they can't vote, but they must fill out an update form prior to being permitted to vote. Make sure you check the box at the top that says update. Once a voter fills that form out, completes it, they must sign it at the bottom right-hand corner to authorize that information to be updated by the Board of Registrars. That voter then votes a regular ballot and deposits it in your machine. If a voter's name does not appear on your list, please call the Board of Registrars. If you would provide a complete legal name, a date of birth, driver's license number, or the last 4 digits of that voter's Social Security number. With that information, the Board of Registrars may determine that voter is entitled to vote, that a human error has been made, and they verify to you that that voter should be able to cast a ballot at your location that day. Make sure you record the name of the person at the registrar's office that gave you this information. Once the verification box is checked and the form is filled out and signed by the voter, turn the form over. On the back, there's a verification box. It has a place for you to list the name of the person that gave you that information, fill out that portion, and then that voter is entitled to vote a regular ballot and cast it through your tabulation device that day. When using a paper sign-in list in Alabama, most voters will sign in column 1 on the voter's poll list. That is a heading of voters that do not need assistance. Column 2 is for a signature voter that does require assistance. Column 3 is provided for the person that assists that voter. Anyone in Alabama may assist a voter except that voter's employer, agent of that employer, or union agent. Once they have signed in the appropriate lines, make sure you issue them the correct ballot. The ballot style will be beside that voter's name on the list of voters, and then offer them a secrecy folder to put that ballot in while they're going through the voting process and returning to the tabulation device. In addition to the voter's poll list, there's a clerk's poll list provided. Please record the name of the voter on the same line that they signed on the voter's poll list, and make sure it's a clear, legible name to identify that person as casting a vote that day in your precinct. Once a voter has cast their ballot, please offer that voter an I voted sticker. When they leave the building, I want to cover who is entitled to be in your facility that day. The poll workers, poll watchers, voters, anyone brought to assist a voter, and if needed, a law enforcement agent as appropriate. Also, you have a voting machine technician in your county. If you have a situation you called your clerk, that technician may come in as well during the process that day. Also in your packet, there is a report of change of residency or death form. The only people permitted to fill this form out is a family member of the voter, the inspector of your precinct, or your local probate judge, sheriff, or circuit court clerk. Also in your packet, you'll have a pink sheet, which is a complaint form. If the voter wants to share information back to the local election official, please offer them a complaint form. They can fill it out at their home. This form must be notarized. There's a place on the back for the notarization. The address for the Secretary of State's office is also provided on the back of the form. They would mail that to the Secretary of State. If it is not notarized, it will not be considered a valid complaint form. Once your voting process slows down that morning, I have some suggestions. First of all, take your yellow sheet that has the instructions of what you would need to close the polls with that night. There are labels provided for your precinct. Please place those labels on all return envelopes to indicate where those results came from. Please place a label on your provisional box as well to identify that box has come from your location. Also, if you're the inspector or the provisional officer, please open the provisional booklet and refresh your memory, read over those instructions, and have your supplies laid out in case someone does come in to vote provisional. That will make the process much easier. If a voter makes an error on a ballot and they bring it to you and want to complete a new ballot, make sure you take possession of that ballot, spoil it by tearing a corner off of it, and place it in the spoiled ballot envelope before you issue a new ballot to that voter.